Welcome to this Pixotope tutorial. In this video we'll cover how to use virtual cameras inside of Pixotope. In Pixotope by default we will have one camera in our scene, named Pixotope Tracked Camera. As the name suggests, this is the camera in our scene that reads from the incoming tracking data and moves around accordingly. Sometimes, however, we might want to control the camera independently from our tracking data by using in-engine tools, such as the level sequencer, to animate the camera's location, rotation, and so on. To achieve this, we cannot directly animate the tracked camera as every frame it updates to be where the tracking data tells it to be. Instead, we have to use a separate virtual camera in order to achieve this. In our Add menu, we'll find and add a virtual camera to our level. We'll then position the camera where we want it to be in the scene. In my case, I'll place it in the back of the scene looking at the logo. You'll notice that when we click play, we immediately possess the tracked camera, with no way currently to switch to the virtual camera. We can achieve the desired camera switching functionality by creating a very simple blueprint. In our content drawer, we'll right-click and create a new blueprint with the actor parent class. We'll name it BP Camera Controls. Then we'll double-click to open our blueprint in the blueprint editor. Once it's open, we'll head straight to the event graph. While applicable for certain situations, we won't be needing any of the existing events for this example, so we'll go ahead and delete them. Instead, we'll be using custom events to manually switch between the cameras. We'll use two custom events for this. One for switching to the virtual camera and one for switching back to the tracked camera. We'll name the first custom event Camera Switch Tracked Camera and the second one Camera Switch Virtual Camera. We'll also make sure to enable the Call in Editor flag for both custom events, as it will allow us to easily test the functionality from the editor later on. Let's start by adding functionality for the tracked camera switch first, as it's the most straightforward. We'll drag out from the tracked camera custom event and search for Switch to Tracked Camera. That is really all we need to do for this one. There are a few options we can play around with here, but we'll talk more about those later on. For the virtual camera, we'll do the same thing, but instead of a switch to tracked camera node, we'll add a switch to camera node instead. The difference between these are, the first one is limited to switching to only the tracked camera, whereas the second can switch to any virtual camera in our scene. For this reason, we also need to tell the node which virtual camera to switch to. That is what this additional camera input on the node is for. So what we need next is to somehow make a reference to the virtual camera we have placed in the level. There are a handful of methods we can use to achieve that, but in this example, we'll manually reference the camera using variables. In the variables section of our blueprint editor, we'll click the plus button to add a new variable, and we'll call it virtual camera. We'll also set the variable type to be a virtual camera instead of the default boolean. And we'll select object reference as the reference type. Before I forget, we'll also click on the closed eye icon next to the variable to expose it to the level editor. We'll need this later to complete the reference. We will now drag the variable into the graph and get the virtual camera reference. If I now try to connect the variable to the switch to camera node, you'll see it doesn't actually allow me to do that, with the reasoning being that the input is not looking for a virtual camera reference, but rather a component of the virtual camera, namely the Cine camera component. Luckily, we can easily extract the necessary information from the variable by dragging from its output into the graph and search for Get Cine Camera Component. We can now connect our new output to the camera input on the switch to camera node. Back in our level editor, we'll drag our new blueprint into the scene. With the blueprint now added to the level, we can complete the reference to the virtual camera. Since we exposed the variable from earlier to the level editor, we can find a drop-down in our details panel from where we can select which virtual camera we want to reference. In this case, we only have one to pick, so we'll select that one. Right above our drop-down, you'll also see a couple of buttons. These are the custom events that we created earlier, which we can now use to test the logic directly from the editor. Let's jump into play mode so that we can test our new functionality. As expected, we start by looking through the tracked camera. Let's select the blueprint from our outliner and click the camera switch to virtual camera button. Immediately we snap to look through the virtual camera instead. From this point, we can now start animating or controlling the virtual camera by any means we see fit. Clicking the camera switch to tracked camera button takes us back to the tracked camera. Back in our blueprint, let's take a look at some of the other settings on our camera switching nodes. Exclusive to the virtual camera node, we have one option called Copy from Tracked. This is on by default and allows you to copy settings such as aperture and focal length from the tracked camera. If you wish to manually control these settings, make sure to turn this option off. Shared between the two camera switching nodes, we have the blending options. These options allow us to make an interpolated move between the two cameras. The blend time lets us choose the duration in seconds we want the move to last, and the function and EXP options allow us to shape the easing of the move. I'll go ahead and type in a value of 2 into the blend time for both of these nodes. Attempting the same switching functionality again, we now move smoothly between the cameras. For more information on this or any other Pixotope subject, please visit the Pixotope Help Center, link in the description.